Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to Creation Innovation. Today we have Ariel Garten. Thank you for being here, Ariel.
Oh, my joy and pleasure. Hello, Elizabeth, and hello, everyone.
To give you a little background on Ariel, she is a neuroscientist, innovator, and entrepreneur whose driving purpose is to empower and help others understand how their brain works in order to live a healthy, happy life. I mean, first of all, that statement alone, we could go on and on and on, but let me continue. Ariel's unique background has taken her from working in neuroscience research labs to owning a fashion design label to being the female founder and CEO of a Silicon Valley backed brain computer interface tech startup, InteraXon. Is that how you say it, Gabrielle?
InteraXon.
Yeah. InteraXon, the technology that sparked the creation of Muse. Muse, the brain sensing headband, is an award winning wearable technology that assists and trains meditation that is used by hundreds of thousands of people, including Mayo Clinic, who you know that I research and talk about all the time, and NASA, everybody knows NASA, to track the brain and teach meditation. That is amazing. Ariel's invited to share her unique and empowering insights, keynoting across stages across the world, speaking about happiness, meditation, how the brain works, neuroscience, empowering women in business, and telling her own innovation story. Thank you so much for being here. We're not even going to have enough time with all the things that I want to talk about. So first of all that to say, what in this moment for you, Ariel, is driving you? Like, what is it that you want to talk to us about today?
Oh, so what really drives me these days is brain health. Thinking about the things that you can do to keep your brain sharp and healthy, both from a practical standpoint as well as a mental health standpoint. How it is that you keep thoughts in your mind that make your world feel like a better place.
Which, I mean, the world outside of our brain right now is not the best example of what we would want on a day to day. And so I think really trying to hone that in and bring it back to our own practice and what that looks like for each of us is even more important than it would have been in a world full of rainbows and butterflies, which it never has been realistically, but even more important now. And what I talk about often is for those of us that are stewarding little ones forward as well, it's important for us to learn those tools to do better than the ones that went before us, perhaps with our own parents and grandparents, et cetera. There's so much out there around brain health and meditation and happiness courses and all the things. Where does somebody start when they feel like, okay, my mental state might not be what I want it to be, and I have this awareness? Where do I begin? What should I do?
Great. So, awareness is a fantastic beginning. It means that you're actually observing what's going on in your own mind and in your own body. You might gain that awareness by noticing that you feel really stressed, or that, the world feels a little overwhelming, or that you feel foggy in the mind, or that, you feel kind of sad and depressed. Maybe just now, or maybe it's been a long term thing. In any of these cases, a great place to start is with a simple meditation practice. And for those of you who are not familiar with how to start a meditation practice, it's very simple. You just sit down, focus your attention on your breath or on one thing. And then when your mind wanders away from that thing, you bring your attention back to your breath. So this might seem ridiculously simple. You're just focusing on your breath and breathing, but it has a number of profound benefits. One is by breathing, you are down regulating your autonomic nervous system and calming yourself down, taking a step out of the situation. And by observing your thoughts, so noticing when your mind is wandering and then choosing to come back to your breath, you're doing a few important things. One is actually observing your thoughts. So now you are in metacognition, you're aware of your thinking rather than being inside of it. So you can say, like, hey, I see my thoughts are really angry and negative now. which is very different than being in the moment and, just riding those angry negative thoughts. Or you can say, I see, I notice that I'm feeling these things. And when you're able to gain this perspective, this metacognition, you are strengthening your prefrontal cortex, you're down regulating your amygdala, and you're able to move into a position of the curious witness and observer, which is the first steps towards moving to solution, to understanding and processing your feelings as opposed to being thrown under by them.
Which is a practice in and of itself, right? To get I think it's important to note that it's not something that you start today and you master. There are masters of this who do it as a practice for many, many years. And you can get better at it, but it really is something that it's you're training your brain essentially. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the more you see those effects in your day to day life, and in your health. So, as a neuroscientist, what have you noticed that are the most, um, I guess, the easiest changes for people to notice with their brain when they start practices like this?
There's a number of really fascinating things that actually happen in the brain when you meditate. So, one of the things that you might see is a sensation or feel is the sensation of your mind becoming quieter. So, most of us go through our lives with this sort of chatter in our brain, our internal dialogue. That's a network called the default mode network that's just responsible for chatting away inside your head when you're not really thinking about much. When you have a meditation practice, the uh, default mode network actually down regulates. And so the idea of the monkey mind or the chattering brain that you might hear about in meditation, it really has a neuroscientific corollary, and that is the activity of the default mode that then quiets with your meditation practice.
So, when it's calming that kind of monkey brain situation in that moment, but then does that extend to the rest of your day more and more as you move forward, or is it just that you're talking about during that time of meditation as you continue to do that more and more?
So, a long term meditation practice confers not just state changes. So, in the moment when you're meditating, you feel the change, but also trait changes. So, if you do it repeatedly over time, you actually have a down regulated default mode network throughout the day. Just in
Okay.
the same way that when you go to the gym, you're really working that muscle and you're seeing the increase in that muscle in that moment, it's tense. And then over time, you have the stronger muscle throughout the day. And that
Amazing.
actually is the same with most of the brain changes that come from meditation. They happen both in the moment as well as over time. So, one of the most common changes to see is an impact in the prefrontal cortex. So, the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for thinking, planning, organizing. It really are higher order processes. So, the bad news is, as you age, your prefrontal cortex thins. The good news is, if you're able to maintain a long term meditation practice, you can maintain the thickness of your prefrontal cortex even while you age. And so, that activity that you're
Wow.
doing, yeah, yeah, it's quite amazing. That activity that you're doing when you are kind of jumping up a level, when you're observing your own mind, that is the responsibility of the prefrontal cortex. And so is the activity of attention. So, one of the big things that you're doing when you meditate is you're training your attention. You're training your prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of your attention. It's also the seat of your inhibition. That's why meditation can stop you from doing things that you may have otherwise just done had you not been, thinking about it, like flying off the handle and yelling at your kids. So, meditation increases your inhibition, which is another process in your prefrontal cortex. And meditation also downregulates your amygdala. So the amygdala is the part of your brain responsible for your fight or flight. So when many of us see something scary, whether it's real or imagined, or a picture of something scary, our amygdala fires off. Well, with the long term meditation practice, your amygdala not only decreases in activity, but MRIs of long term meditators show that the amygdala can even decrease in size. So it's like a really long term change in your fear response.
That's incredible. What is the minimum time for somebody to meditate where it starts to make a difference? I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, meditate, 20 minutes a day, maybe 10 in the morning, 10 at night." And I know for me, even with kids, I'd be like, I cannot even fathom waking up 10 minutes earlier because I'm so tired because I'm not sleeping through the night with little ones. Uh, and at night, I'm so exhausted by the time I get to put them to bed. I'm like falling asleep at 7:30, So even to find that time. But then at the same time, wanting to do something better than nothing. But what is considered worth doing versus it's not moving the needle?
Great question. So, the number one thing that makes a difference is regularity and consistency. So, it's less about the amount of time that you do every day and more about the
Okay.
fact that you actually do it every day.
Oh,
You
that's good
build
to
the
know. That
habit.
makes me feel a lot better about myself.
Totally. So, in the studies that we've done with Muse, we're able to demonstrate that just 5 minutes a day can have a significant impact in your quality of life, your stress, your anxiety, burnout. So Mayo Clinic has done many, many studies with Muse. In the first one, they worked with cancer patients using Muse to deal with the stress of surgery. They told them to meditate for as little as 3 minutes a day, as long as you want. And just from that instruction, saw really significant improvements in stress, fatigue, and quality of life. The doctors at the Mayo Clinic then did a study with Muse using it during the pandemic when they were at their most stressed, and they used it for on average 5 minutes a day, and in doing so reduced their burnout by 54% while improving their cognitive function and decreasing their stress. So really, it doesn't need to be a ton. You don't need to feel like you have to sit there for 20 minutes. Start small, and then once you're comfortable with 5 minutes, work your way up. 6 minutes, 7 minutes. You might love it and want to stay for 15, but not an obligation. It's just an invitation.
And what are the for those studies, what were those time periods?
So those studies do. Mayo Clinic always sets their studies for 3 months. In this other studies that have been done with Muse, at 6 weeks, you see significant improvements. So
Awesome.
yeah, I would say after week one, you may or may not feel much, but by week 4, 5, 6, you're saying, "Wow." People in your life are noticing a difference, and you want to keep doing it because you feel better every day.
And I love that it's just a matter of those short periods of time because I think once you get in that habit, okay, I'm for myself right now, I'm doing this app. I think I'm on day 23 and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so proud of myself that I've actually seeing that I've stuck with it for that amount of time. But yet at the same time, knowing I'm working towards a 40-day window, so I'm halfway there. But now that I'm halfway there, I'm like, "Oh, well, maybe I can keep doing this," right? Because I have it in my routine now. It's part of my day to day, and I think that we notice that with lots of different things. So I love that the studies show that it makes a difference within that short amount of time. It's not a year. It wasn't, an 18-month study that anybody can do 6 weeks or 3 months. And you don't even have to base it off the study. I'm just very data driven, right? So I like to know those numbers and know that there was something to show for that. Also to point out to that Mayo Clinic study that I talk about all the time, that they did one for cancer patients and fertility patients, and that someone going through fertility is the same stress level as a cancer patient. So knowing that they've done this with Muse on those same demographic, knowing that the emotions that they're going through are similar to the fertility community, there you have it, right? It's not so much of us just saying, "Oh, meditate and life will get better." It's scientifically proven that things will improve with your mind, body, I even say spiritual mindset and all of the things. Um, I'm just curious, what about NASA? Tell us how that happened.
NASA is a fun one. I've spoken on the NASA Ames campus at Singularity University. Um,
Amazing.
but the specific NASA reference here was to a Mars simulator. So Muse has been part of the Mars simulation that NASA put together for several years now, tracking cognitive state of um, astronauts in the Mars simulation.
That is incredible. That is so cool. And congratulations to you for being able to get thousands of people and these big companies to get behind what you guys have created in your messaging, because it is a collective of energy behind things like this. I really do believe. And the more people that can be getting into that state of mind of calming their brain. And I mean, what kind of world would we live in if all of our world leaders were using Muse every day and were just meditating on their own? I feel like that alone would be a game changer for the world we live in. I think. Um, but back to just the thought about the brain itself. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I have mental illness," or I have other things going on. Maybe I have ADHD and I'm not able to calm my brain." What is the idea for them in relation to calming their brain when they actually know that they have something going on, right? So it's almost like they convince themselves that they're not capable of quieting their thoughts because somebody has labeled them XYZ, right? I hear this a lot. Like, I can't meditate because I have this going on, or, my brain just doesn't function like that.
So, a couple things to say. One is it's all just training. Um, it's really all just training. So, if you feel like, oh, my brain can't quiet, um, I promise you it can. Just take the first step. Just, meditate for 1 minute, then
Mhm.
meditate for a minute and a half, and then 2 minutes. And then you are able to train your brain to do that thing. And then if that sounds daunting, that's literally why we made Muse. I was somebody who really wanted to meditate, and as a neuroscientist, knew all the benefits of it. As a therapist, was encouraging my patients to meditate. I had fertility patients who I, give meditations to,
Mhm.
and I was a terrible meditator because I was also an entrepreneur, an innovator, and wanting to do all these things, and felt like my brain could never shut down. And so it really was through the process of learning using Muse that I was able to quiet my own mind and learn how to meditate. How I was finally able to be like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, this is giving me guidance and feedback. Right. Focus. It's okay. I can do this.
So we haven't even talked about what Muse itself is when you say that. So it's a sensing headband, but that does what? So you put this headband on, and what happens?
Sure. So this is Muse.
Okay.
Um, it's a clinical grade EEG. It's a brain sensing headband. It slips on just like a pair of glasses, and it's able to track your brain while you meditate. So, when you focus your attention on your breath in meditation, Muse actually gives you audio feedback to let you know that you're focused. And when your mind begins to wander, the audio feedback comes in letting you know your mind is wandering. So, most of us, when we try to meditate, you're
How
like
does it know that, Ariel?
via EEG. So,
Okay.
there's sensors on your forehead and behind your ears.
Okay.
And there's an algorithm that is able to detect your meditation state. It detects when you're focused and detects when your mind is wandering. And so it really lets you know, just like a little coach or guru, when you're doing it right, and encourages you and reinforces you to stay there.
So fascinating. I this sound may sound crazy, but probably 10 or more years, maybe 15 years ago now, I went to the Mayo Clinic to do their brain study, which is they it's like a week long thing where you go through all these different steps to learn about your brain, do scans about your brain and whatnot, just because I was curious about that. My mom has had some mental issues, and I wanted to see, what does that look like if I could say to her, Mom, I'll pay for you to go do this. This is what it's like. But just going through it myself was so fascinating because you learn so much about your brain and the health of your brain, because we just don't. You hear about your heart health. You know, I remember commercials growing up about Cheerios for your heart or something like that, but nobody really talks about brain. And how did you get into neuroscience?
So I was really fascinated by how the world worked and how the brain worked. I went to school for science and then drilled down into neuroscience, and then began working in a research lab with Dr. Steve Mann. He's actually the guy who invented the wearable computer, and he had a
Mhm.
brain computer interface system. And so we went through a kind of 20-year process by now. That was in 2002, to take the technology out of the lab and figure out what the really best application for it was to help people with their brain health. And so the first application was a meditation tool because we could give you real time feedback on your brain during meditation. The next application we built was then a sleep intervention. So Muse can now track your sleep as effectively as being in a sleep lab. So you don't have to
Wow.
pay thousands of dollars to go to a sleep lab. You can
I
just,
also did that. That was crazy. That was probably 30 years ago almost now.
yep, you can just use this in your own bed and get the same data.
Wow. And then do you need, so speaking of that data, because usually when you do those, a doctor is kind of tracking you to say, okay, this is what happened. You need to be, you know, in my case, I had idiopathic hypersomnia, so medication to do something else or whatever. So you have this data on your own now, but then what do you do with that? Do you need somebody to be guiding you through it? Obviously, the meditation aspect is straightforward. You don't need a medical doctor to be working with you on that. But for the sleep data and stuff, how does that work?
So the sleep data actually comes directly to your phone. Um,
Okay.
and so you can see your hypnogram and very, very detailed information on your sleep. If you're somebody who doesn't have a medical condition, obviously this information is really useful to help you sleep better. The
Mhm.
meditation then helps you sleep better. And we have a tool called the digital sleeping pill that's able to actually guide your brain into sleep. If you suspect you may have a medical sleep condition, obviously go to your doctor, and then this is data you can bring to them um,
Mhm.
to help them understand what's going on in your sleep.
And they would, do you know, are they able to take that data and say, yes, this is equivalent to what we would be doing in the lab? Or do they say, we also need you to go to the lab? Or do we
So
not know that?
it depends on the doctor and the condition.
Okay.
We also have lots of researchers that use Muse as a in-home sleep lab. So people doing studies on things like idiopathic hypersomnia will send
Mhm.
Muse home to uh, population in their study and be able to gather brain data and sleep data and gain new insights into those conditions.
So cool. I'm fascinated in so many ways on all of this. What is the biggest advice that you could give to somebody that's just hearing this for the first time and wondering where to start and what to do?
So the first thing is meditation is not scary. It's easy. You can do it. Don't worry. You don't even need to have faith in yourself. You just need to sit down and do it. And if you're like, oh my God, this is annoying or I'm bad at it, all of those are just thoughts. And thoughts are just what we're learning to deal with here. So when that thought comes up, just move it aside and come back to your breath. If you can't come back to your breath, come back to the meditation tomorrow. It's okay. Um, and so there are lots of easy guided meditations. We have an app called Meditation Studio with lots of guided meditations. And if you want more help and guidance, Muse gives you real time feedback on your brain to help you really know how to get into that state.
What about for kids, Ariel? Is it work on helping children to learn to meditate and regulate that?
So we typically don't so technically, we say don't use Muse for anyone under 16 just because of data privacy. We want to be as compliant as possible, though there are lots of adults that do use Muse with their children. And a study from Kansas State University demonstrated that using Muse with grade 7 and 8 students decreased visits to the principal's office by 72%.
Awesome. Because I know my little 7-year-old wants to be doing my breathwork meditations with me and all the things, and I always try to invite him in, even though it's, sometimes distracting for me, but I never want to discourage that for him. And I'm sure with something like Muse, he would be all over this situation. So, where can people purchase this, learn about this?
Awesome. So you can find Muse at choosemuse.com, CHOOSEMUSE. You can find us on all the socials at Choose Muse. We're also on Amazon. And you can find me at Ariel's Musings, ARIELS_MUSINGS. I should also highlight that in the Muse app and the Meditation Studio app, we actually have a fertility collection um, built by one of our meditation teachers who went through her own fertility journey.
Amazing. That I love that so much because obviously that's where the majority of our audience is. Also with sleep. There's there I just got off a call with a client right before this. She said she hasn't slept in 4 days. She just suffered a miscarriage and she's really
Mm.
struggling with sleeping because of the stress that her body's going through and her grief, of course. And I literally just said to her, "Why don't you put on a meditation just to start to try to relax your body and with a very easy lift?" And I think this would be so perfect for her.
And I have to say, I don't know that it was a result of the fertility collection, but I got pregnant naturally at 42.
Awesome.
I had, I have a 1.5-year old. I'm 44 now. Um, and so I don't know that meditation directly led to that, but it certainly has made the journey much easier.
For sure. And I don't I'm one of those too. I had my third first at 41, second 42 and a half, third at almost 44. And I do believe that that makes a big difference in, like you said, when you were talking about the fight or flight, right? It kind of regulates your system. And when you regulate your system, it allows your reproductive system to do what it's meant to do, regardless of our age. And basically puts all the cells in a happy place in your body. And when your cells are in a happy place, when your eggs are feeling good and healthy, you get a healthy embryo. And that's, I think, the one question that people ask me all the time. Well, are your kids healthy? So concerned because I had them all over 40, and I'm like, yes, they all are very healthy and you know whatever. So I certainly would, we have nothing to say that that is why, as you mentioned, but if nothing else, we know that it makes a huge difference. And I'm so happy to hear that. I will certainly be shouting this out.
There's a real scientific term for the happy cells. So,
Hmm.
Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, who is a Nobel Prize winning scientist, extraordinary scientist, she did
Awesome.
a study on the effects of meditation and the cellular milieu. So she and Dr. Alyssa Epfel gave a meditation intervention to moms who are parenting critically ill children, chronically ill
Hmm.
children. And so these were moms that were super stressed. She gave
Wow.
a portion of them meditations to do regularly and then looked at their cells. She measured the length of their telomeres, which is the little DNA caps on the end of your DNA. So at the end of your DNA, you've got molecules that shrink when you're stressed and grow when you are not stressed. And she found that meditation actually increased the length of telomeres, and those telomeres are an actual mark of cellular aging. And her biochemical explanation for this was that by having positive, healthy thoughts, not negative thoughts, but positive thoughts. And these women were in the same situation, nothing had changed, but they just felt they had
Mhm.
a control and mastery over their life, which they didn't have before. They were able to improve their thinking. And in doing so, that led to a biochemical change in their cellular milieu, in the, soup that your cells are bathed in, which led to real measurable change in their cellular age.
Wow, that's amazing. I have a friend who has a genetically terminally ill son. I'm definitely going to be passing that on to her because I know she could use it, and all of her community that they talk with, because that is a whole nother challenge on a day-to-day basis. But that's really great information to know. Thank you for sharing that. Well, thank you for your time today and being here, and I can't wait to look it up myself and get one and start working on my own brain health, and hopefully get to all the stats that you talked about earlier with, just incredible to know that you are able to actually reverse the aging process and of your brain and all of the things. So thank you so much for being here again.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. It was such a joy.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.